Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am so excited to have you here for this edition of Women in Film's monthly speaker series, where we talk to the media makers and the industry changers behind the media that we love. I'm Ebony Adams. I'm the manager of public programs at Women in Film, and I am so excited to bring you tonight's conversation because we're going to be talking about sustainable filmmaking with some of the brightest minds working on this very issue. They're going to be explaining what sustainable production is, why it means so much more than just whether to use plastic water bottles on set. They're going to walk us through some of the exciting developments and existing challenges. They'll be making a case essentially for why all of us, creators, executives, and audiences need to be aware of what's going on behind the scenes to make the media that we all enjoy. Before I introduce tonight's guests, I'd like to take a moment to extend our thanks to the West Hollywood Arts Commission for their incredible generosity in helping us produce programs like this for the community. They've been a vital and consistent partner over the years in helping us to offer thought-provoking conversations related to women in the screen industries. And now I'm going to introduce our guests. First up is Emily O'Brien. Since her first days in production, Emily knew there was a way for the role of sustainability on set to go beyond basic waste management and recycling. Her early years of dedication to green practices and passion for the environment on set is what earned her the nickname Earth Angel. From fellow crew members over the walkie, and to this day, it's still what production colleagues call her whenever she's on set. By 2013, she founded Earth Angel and turned it into a scalable model that has since inspired the entertainment industry and significantly reduced its environmental impact. Her personal mission and the mission of her company is to integrate a standardized method of environmental accountability in the entertainment industry by creating the most innovative, practical, and seamless solutions to discuss the logistical sustainability challenges faced by entertainment production. Next, we have Julie Cousteaus. Julie's the founder and CEO of Tandem Pictures, producers of a number of acclaimed independent features, which have played in competition at top-tier film festivals such as Sundance and Tribeca. Tandem also produces thousands of pieces of original short-form content for some of the biggest brands in the world, from Amazon to Chase Bank, Ford Motors, Netflix, and more. Tandem is a creative content studio focusing on hiring women, we love that, and diverse staff and on-set crew, giving 1% profit back to charity and leading the indie film space in eco-sustainable filmmaking practices, with content made per the Producers Guild Green Best Practices and Environmental Media Association standards. Finally, we've got Audrey Bennett, who currently manages environmental, social, and governance initiatives for Viacom CBS Global Sourcing, including renewable energy procurement, green production practices, and sustainability strategy. In 2016, she was hired at CBS Television to launch the Eye on the Environment program. And under her leadership, CBS won a 2017 Green Supply Chain Award and 21 Environmental Media Award Green Seals. Audrey is a board member of the Sustainable Production Alliance, which I hope to ask her about tonight, Young Professionals in Energy, and the Green Business Council of Southern California, and was recognized as the 2018 Green Biz 30 Under 30 list. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
For having us.
Of course. So let's get started. I mentioned during the virtual green room that sustainable filmmaking is something I'm not ashamed to say is pretty new to me. I had the idea for this panel months and months ago, and it was basically a way for me to just get in all of your inboxes and see if I could get you to explain to me exactly what sustainable filmmaking is, why it's something that I need to be concerned with, how I go about as a creative myself, adopting some of these practices and protocols on the sets that I'm part of. So rather than have someone else moderate this chat, I was like, no, I'm gonna just take this myself and get the information I need right away. So I would love to start with just asking each of you, what is sustainable filmmaking? What is sustainable production? And what are the most pressing concerns on your plate in regards to sustainable production right now? Emily, why don't I start with you?
Sure, yeah. So I think the way to think about sustainable production is sort of the way to think about sustainability. And a lot of folks in the sustainability landscape, refer to sustainable business models as like the triple bottom line philosophy. So traditional business models are really focused on, the standard bottom line, which is profit. And then in sustainable businesses, we're talking about people, planet, and profit. And so that's really at the core of what, sustainable filmmaking is. So we have to take into account all the different ways that we have an impact on the environment, from the amount of energy we consume to power our sets, to the amount of waste that we generate from catering and craft services, to the amount of flights we fly and fuel we consume. There's a lot of different ways that the standard production activities have an impact. And that's just on production, right? Then there's other impacts too that happen in development, of course, in post-production, during distribution. And so like any other industry, we have an environmental impact. And so the sustainable filmmaking movement is really about targeting what are those key areas of impact and creating solutions to try to reduce them. And I think it's been really challenging for the filmmaking industry in particular, because we are this traveling circus and we're not like a manufacturing facility, for example, that exists for years and years and has the same employees circling in and out of it, where you can kind of create a model that is permanent, right? Ours are a lot more different because we're always on the go. We have an industry of freelancers that are always kind of in and out of different projects as well. So it's been, we've had to adapt to those nuances, if you will. So that's really what it boils down to. And with Earth Angel, we've really been about how do we create solutions that are tangible, accessible for crew members on the ground to adapt to these new ways of working.
Julie, I'd like you to answer that as well. So, what sustainability means for you in your work at Tandem, but also, can you talk about like how long has sustainable production been a core tenet of, Tandem's protocol? Has it been there from the beginning?
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm really humbled to be sitting with Audrey and Emily. This is a treat for me, and I feel like I hope I'm going to learn a lot too here on this panel today. For Tandem Pictures, sustainable film practicing really came out of an intersectional environmentalist approach. And so when I started the company to give women more opportunity. And as I pointed the lens towards women, it wasn't a big leap to see, well, it's not only women that are underserved in our global audience, it's so many communities. It's people of color, it's LGBTQIA. There's so much ageism also in how we build our teams. And as we started to build our teams differently and really focus on equity and making the strongest global representation we could to help a director fulfill their vision and bring it to life, we realized that if we weren't also looking at climate injustice and how the social injustices we were speaking about in our stories first impact all of the people that we're working with and we're building our teams from, that it felt half-baked not to take climate into consideration. And so, I was a kid of the 90s, so recycling and things were always in my mind. That was about it. And I never really understood a whole scope of what a sustainable practice could be and the real meaning of intersectional environmentalism, where we begin to see this tremendous overlap between the injustices we have socially in our country and the globe, and how climate change is directly affecting those communities first. And it will affect all of us, it already has. So I couldn't agree with Emily more. I mean, at Tandem, we say we're a platform for people, the planet, and powerful storytelling. That's it. We want to do our work in a way that does not harm our fellow citizens and that doesn't harm the planet. And we have found it to be the best team building exercise too, that you have all these incredible artists come together to not only make a great piece of work, but they make it in a way that they can walk away and feel good about. And that's the process that's tough stuff to train, where as a producer, I take my line producerial experience and I look at every single department and say, how can we help the director fulfill their vision and make choices that are sustainable and show people that the creative absolutely can be achieved. And like every other issue that comes up on set, champions adapt. We can adapt to green practices and make them standard practices for sure.
I love that. I love that. It reminds me of the conversation that we have around intimacy coordinators on set. And
yeah.
part of the resistance to it is this going to affect the stories that I tell or the way that I tell my stories? And so intimacy coordinators are, in the practice of saying to directors, to producers, I'm going to help you tell your stories in a better way. Allow me to help you. This is not about me taking away the tools in your toolbox. It's about me giving you more. Also, I love that this panel is all women working in this space. I heard the term intersectional environmentalism. Yes, I'm all about it. Audrey, throwing to you, tell us about your work in sustainable production. As I mentioned in your bio, you were brought on by CBS in 2016 to start this Eye on the Environment initiative. What exactly is bound up in that?
Yeah, definitely. And I will say now, we merged with Viacom, so we're called Viacom CBS. And from kind of the corporate side of things, sustainability is now being termed environmental social governance, which is really what investors are calling it. But I think it's a nice reminder that, that social piece and that intersectionality, that's really critical to sustainability beyond the environment. And currently our ESG priorities in the last year as a combined company, we've been, looking through the business to see what are our three main priorities. And it's on-screen content and social impact, workforce and culture, and sustainable production and operations. And not only is sustainable production called out in that third pillar, but it really, folds into all of those. So, even on-screen content, I think that that's a huge piece that from a studio perspective, we're looking at, making sure that we're communicating and telling stories properly, whether it's on CBS News, whether we're reporting, climate change impacts correctly, or if we're integrating it into storytelling. But of course, our operations are critical and operating in a way that's sustainable.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I would love to hear from all of you right now. In your opinion, where are you finding like the most resistance or misunderstanding in the industry? What seems to be like the most challenging thing to implement, in your work at the moment? And Audrey, why don't we start with you and then we'll go back around.
Sure, definitely. I think, in the early days, the resistance was around, the environment in general. I think in these last even 5 years, there's been a huge kind of cultural shift in the way we talk about climate change, just even at the national level. So I'd say recently it's about costs. And I'd say, sustainability has been around long enough that a lot of these product prices have come way down at very close to parity in a way that I think a lot of people have forgotten or don't know. And so I think it's something that's the main concern I get. And I think once we show people how, small compared to the overall budget, how small it is. And Emily does a great job. She works on a lot of our shows and she does a great job of tracking how, if you hire Emily, you will save money compared to the cost of her fees. It's as easy as that.
So Julie, what about you? What's this sort of, where are you finding the most resistance, or have you found the most resistance or misunderstanding in the industry?
Well, first, the biggest challenge, which I do want to acknowledge, has been COVID. It has been incredibly difficult to balance keeping teams safe and prioritizing people's health and lives, and really figure out what the impact of all the testing, the PPE, the constant having to change the PPE is when you're running your metrics across how my project is sustainable or not. And we've done so much research on the efficacy of compostable masks and all sorts of different products that have come out, but because nothing's been scientifically stamped, we haven't utilized those products. So that's been a real challenge. As far as resistance goes, I think it's twofold. I think on the independent level, it's honestly just time. Getting a movie up and running when you're working in like the 10 million or less space is really difficult. And producers are spinning their wheels constantly just to make sure that all the puzzle pieces are there. So the team is set up to win and succeed, and that you all get to day one, can do your work. And so then you say, well, how about we shift our point of view and we look at making all of our choices sustainably? Does that sound good? And the poor producer says, no, because I have to figure out how to do that. So the resistance I find isn't because people don't want to, it's because there's a learning curve issue. And that's what, you know, my business partner and I are trying to address with the help of our amazing PR team at Sunshine Stacks. We've been doing a little bit of a university roadshow where we built, you know, a 90-minute workshop. And we used our last film as a template of how you can make sustainable choices across all these departments in the hopes that kids coming out of school, you know, our green best practices will just be their practices and there won't be that huge learning curve gap. And the other thing is money. But as Audrey just pointed out, you know, we have found it saves us money, especially when you're looking at making creative choices that serve a specific script, depending on what your time period is, where the costumes are coming from. So many little choices add up to a huge impact. And that money can go back on screen or get returned to an investor more quickly. So it really does make a difference cost-wise. And as Emily wisely pointed out, it's also, you know, no matter how resistant people might be, if you think about value these days, what is valuable? Yes, it's a business and we're all in it to make money, but at what cost? You know, if you're destroying the land that you've been invited to film in, and not serving the community that you're working in, then honestly, I feel like that's disgraceful behavior. And it's not taking into account your fellow citizens, your team, the people that you're working with, or the environment. And it doesn't have to be that way. And if we all shift our perspective slightly, we can really make a difference here.
Yeah. Emily, so Earth Angel is known as like a go-to for the industry and sustainable production. Where are you finding resistance or misunderstanding that you continually, you know, have to address? You've worked on, you know, or your company has worked on, you know, large, incredibly high budget productions and then smaller things as well. So consistently, what are you finding that are those challenges?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with Audrey and Julie 100%. Cost and COVID have been major barriers historically. I think where Earth Angel's role really sits in is looking at the behavior change aspect. You know, I often tell people that we're in the business of behavior change, essentially. Like, we are trying to get people to change their habits, go for new products, work differently than somehow they have for decades. And these are people who are, you know, I'm sure everyone listening understands, like, are overworked. You know, we work long hours, we work in crazy weather conditions, you know, and to position sustainability as like this is going to be something that's added to their plate is definitely not the way that I recommend approaching it, you know, which is why we really try to create this communal, engaging element to it, you know. So we try to take as much of the workload off the crew members as we can. And I have to say, the attitude towards it has shifted enormously. I greened my first set in 2011, and I mean, I received threats. I received, like, people were not happy about this presence on the set. And now it's crazy. Like, sometimes we'll wrap a show and a crew member that we just worked with will go on to a different show that maybe doesn't have a sustainability program in place, and they're just texting me like, Earth Angel, where are you? We need you. You know what I mean? Like, it's really funny how it's like, once you see it, you can't unsee it a little bit. And so the behavior change resistance thing is getting better. But I think, to your point, Julie, that you sort of alluded to earlier, which is that there is this idea that it's somehow going to be taking away from the creative process, that I think is still a challenge. And, you know, time and time again, we really try to reiterate that you don't have to sacrifice the creative, right? And in fact, when we have certain constraints, time constraints, budget constraints, whatever it might be, sometimes we get more creative when those happen, you know? And so I think that's really something we're really up against, because we'll still work on projects where the DPs and the gaffers aren't stoked about the idea of using LED lighting, you know? And like that's a challenge, right? Like, how do we get creative decision makers to also get involved? Which is why for us, you know, sustainable filmmaking and being successful in this, it involves everyone. It involves every single stakeholder. It involves the Audreys at the studio level. It involves the Julies. It involves the catering companies, and, you know, the film festivals and the labor unions and the guilds. Like, everyone has a role to play. We have a very decentralized industry in that way. And so how do we kind of engage with all these different pieces of the puzzle to realize, like, you know, we all have choices to make. We all have ways that we can contribute to making this industry more sustainable, because we have to, because there is no film on a dead planet, you know? Like, this is about, we want to do this so we can continue being creatives and doing this work.
Yeah.
You are so right. And, you know, I was just saying to a friend of mine today who's bringing up some challenges around sustainability. I said, you know, we're filmmakers. We face challenges on set every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And what do? We innovate. We problem solve. You know, I find the camera department, the grip and electric department, sometimes those people are the best allies ever, because you say, what do we do if we can't have this? And man, do they come up with some great ideas that are actually literally like half the price of what you are going to do. And so my, you know, my financial brain is like, thank God this is but on the environmental side, it's like, wow, look what we just came up with as a team here. We just problem solved and came up with a solution that's going to save us money and also not impact the planet in a negative way. Like, that's incredible.
I do love that. I think, yeah, you know, thinking about resource constraint from an actual environmental perspective. I mean, these resources are limited, but resource constraint on set can make for creativity is I think a great concept. And I have overheard on our sets before, or on our lots, you know, a gaffer said to someone, hey, why are you reusing this gel? This isn't an indie, just throw it away. And I was like, no. Yeah.
Audrey, I'm going to ask you specifically about the Sustainable Production Alliance. So I know you're a board member of the SPA. Can you talk a little bit specifically about the toolkit that the Sustainable Production Alliance, you know, makes available? Because I think this is something that not enough people know about. Can you walk us through a little bit about what it is?
Yes, definitely. So the Sustainable Production Alliance, or SPA, is a consortium of the main, you know, content creators in Hollywood. So all the major studios are members, and we help fund the greenproductionguide.com. So greenproductionguide.com, please visit. All of the resources are open source because we want everyone to be able to use it. You know, student filmmakers, indies, studios, everybody. So on there's a lot of great tools so the names are all these fruity names. So we have the Peach, which is a best practices checklist. So that really helps you go department by department to see what kind of steps you can take to be more sustainable. If you score, each of these steps has points assigned to them. So if you score a 75 or higher, you can enter to the Environmental Media Association's Green Seal Awards. So that's a great way to also get recognized. And then we also have the PAIR, which is the carbon calculator, so that you can actually see what the environmental impact of your set is. There's also a ton of great resources around, you know, memos, green tips for call sheets, you know, intro letters, catering guidelines, and how to set up food donation contracts and things like that. So yeah, please go visit, and there's a lot of great resources there.
It's fantastic. I'm gonna ask my tech guru in the back to put the link in the chat. I also want to remind people that our panelists will be taking your questions. So I obviously have a billion, and y'all know I love to talk, so it can just be me asking questions, but please do drop your questions in the Q&A window. I would love to get to as many as we can. So speaking
I just want to say something about the the PGA Peach Guide,
Mhm.
you know, when we were looking into how we could be sustainable in a holistic way, that was absolutely the resource that we used. We found the Peach Guide, and actually Jennifer Lynch from SPA reached out earlier this year because on our film Black Bear, we ended up getting a nice amount of press about the sustainability, which was mind-blowing and fantastic. And she reached out and asked us if we used any of these tools. And I talk about it all the time because it was so helpful to have this spreadsheet, you know, of 400 plus things that you can look at and really make choices. You can make choices. You can offer your team choices about how you go about your work. And that guide directly correlates to the Environmental Media Association's seal assigning. So you fill out your checklist of what you managed to accomplish. And when we found out that we got the gold green seal for Black Bear, I mean, my partner Johnny and I were just over the moon. I think we felt like we were winning an Academy Award or something, because it was tough. We tried so hard to have a sustainable set, and it was such a victory and such a wonderful acknowledgement after going through that process. So thank you for all those tools.
Oh, yeah. And I'll make one more plug. We actually recently updated the vendor guide on there. And so now you can search by city, and then you can filter by service. And there should be a lot of great green vendors specifically for the film and television industry in that guide. And we even have some COVID-19 filters. So, everything from, mask recycling to compostable gloves, and as you mentioned earlier.
That's fantastic. I want to come back to so many things that we've mentioned. Definitely, what's going on in the wake of COVID and the pandemic. I definitely want to get back to the money issue and cost. I want to, get back to the toolkit and actually, pulling apart some of the changes that people can start making. But I had a question submitted in advance that I want to make sure I get to, as we talk about these guides that you can offer for production. What can consumers do? What can audiences do if sustainability is of importance to them? So is there a way to know whether, TV or films that we're watching have environmental responsibility involved, in the same way that, for instance, Women in Film and Sundance have our reframe stamp that lets you know if there's a gender balanced production, right? So is there something akin to that for sustainability?
I mean, the Environmental Media Association seal is certainly that. I mean, that absolutely is a seal that you're awarded that goes on your movie, and it sets you apart from films that are not made in accordance with any of the guides that the Producers Guild or the SPA have put together. And the EMA also has seals not only for film, but they're working across the advertising industry now. They're coming up with a university level seal. So yes, you can get that kind of a stamp for sure. And we've made a commitment at Tandem that all of our projects are going to function across the guide, the Peach Guide, and go after the EMA seal every time.
Excellent. Yeah, and then the under greenforemma.org, you can actually see each year's list of recipients and whether they got green or gold seals. And then you should also see the seal at the end of the credits, hopefully.
Yeah.
And so that's another great way to see that. And then the Environmental Media Association also does awards around content, which I think is also a really important piece in terms of, how do stories kind of communicate what we need to do for climate action. And so there's a lot of great stuff at greenforemma.org.
Awesome.
And in the world of social media, I mean, if you see a film or a television show that has, that's shouting out some environmental practice in their creative, whether it's a character who takes a refillable coffee cup to their local coffee shop because that's their thing. They don't throw away paper, or whatever little practice is baked into the creative, shout that out, like take to Twitter and Insta. And I feel like if we all support each other's work and efforts in this space, not only are we going to get to know a lot of really great filmmakers and shows that we might not have otherwise watched, but we're supporting people who are making their work in a way that supports the planet and us.
Yeah. Emily, I want to go back to something I mentioned, like the diversity of clients on your roster. Can you talk a little bit about how you've scaled your work depending upon the size of the production? I know like you've done things from like The Amazing Spider-Man to, streaming series, critically acclaimed streaming series like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but you're also known for being just like incredibly open and giving with people that don't have those kind of budgets. So can you talk a little about the scalability issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every production is its own unique unicorn, so there, as much as having standards and guidelines is absolutely essential, everything has to be customized and tailored to what this production is, what it entails. And it varies region to region, what's available sustainability wise. And then of course it varies in terms of the scope and scale of the project. So, whenever we're approaching one, we're always looking at, okay, what are some of the telltale signs that the sustainability measures need to be focused on? What measures need to be focused on? So for example, is this a huge build job? Like, are we just constructing set after set after set? Are we shooting in multiple locations and, in like cities, that is, and, going to be having a really high travel budget? Like what does it entail? So that's part of the approach. The other approach is, how much time do we have? We have productions that bring us on 14 weeks out, and we have productions that bring us on 3 weeks out. And so we obviously, what's available in that scope of time is going to be different. So the closer we get to principal photography, the more sort of damage control mode one gets into. But to the point about sort of the size of the budget and productions and how that works, I mean, the thing about smaller budget productions is that they are naturally more resourceful. And so, they're naturally going to have smaller carbon footprints. They're likely not going to be flying private jets. They're likely not going to be constructing, massive sets and things like that. But, I'll give an example with like High Maintenance, for example, was one of our smaller scale shows. And it was one of the first shows we ever worked on that just like did not have a travel footprint. Like it was non-existent. And we had to double check with the accounting team and be like, wait a minute, are you sure we didn't buy any flights? Are you sure? Like we honestly couldn't believe it. But with something like that, we had a crew that was so engaged, and Ben Sinclair is one of our Earth Angel ambassadors, and it's just like, was raving about how the compost that we were generating on set and how it was going to these local community gardens, and how almost all the entire crew like biked to set. It was just like a crew of bikers too. So that was really incredible. So I think that just because you're not necessarily a big budget production, in a way, there's opportunity to like really get hyper local with what you're doing too, and have these connections with these community gardens that we helped create. And it's a story about Brooklyn and New York too. So we needed to be good stewards to our community and to represent Brooklyn well. So I think that's a really great example of just like, we had a great team who was willing to, explore new ideas, who saw the value of it. And we just made small changes where we could. And there wasn't anything big or elaborate. We just really helped them, get from A to B in terms of what their goals were.
Mm-hmm. So when someone, comes to you, or you hear about, people asking for advice, and we're talking, micro budgets here, very small budget, independent productions, what are some immediate changes that people can make? Where do you tell people to focus? Because I think, this can seem so overwhelming. There's so many different touch points. There's so many ways that you can make a change, but do you tell people like, start here, and think this through?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's some core things right out of the gate. Eliminating unnecessary travel. The traveling and the fuel consumption tends to be the biggest culprits when it comes to production's footprint. So wherever you can just cut down on that, having less vehicles, and those types of things are just very budget friendly, and really go a long way in terms of your footprint. Reduce items as much as possible, especially single-use plastic. Of course, like if you have to have single-use, can you choose a more sustainable option, such as aluminum? Like in the wake of COVID, a lot of our productions, did want to have single-use options because there was this fear around going reusable and having different dispensers and people using those. So, but rather than reverting to plastic, we went with aluminum. It's infinitely recyclable and a far less easier material to recycle as well. So eliminating single-use plastics is a big one. Obviously, just like having a waste program in place, like making sure you're doing basic recycling, and if you can, composting. Like there's so many compost providers out there now, and yes, you want to make sure you have a system in place so that it doesn't sit around and get smelly. Like you need to have someone monitoring the compost 100%. But it's a lot easier than you think it is. And there's like curbside pickup programs and micro haulers who come and like bike and come collect your compost like all over the country. So looking into options like that. And then, as Audrey said, I mean, the Green Production Guide and sourcing these vendors and cutting down on your paper usage as well. Lots of great technology platforms out there that are helping productions go paperless, like Scriptation and Production Pro and things like that are really helpful for not just the creative process, but also to get people off of paper workflows.
Yeah.
And that's also too some of the innovations that have come out of COVID that we can take as perhaps a positive thing in this really horrendous time that we've all lived through. At least for us, post-production is an area where there's wonderful technology, even just on what we're using with Zoom, but things like Evercast, where it really does simulate a wonderful edit bay experience. And instead of flying your director back and forth, or even the producers or clients, if you work in the ad space, post is really a space where you can give notes, you can review in time without having to have a huge carbon footprint, for sure. And certainly the paper of it all, I'm like a huge QR code person now. I'm like, can we just put everything on a QR code? And never touch paper again.
Right.
And that's a cost savings, but also it's just, that was a great idea. That was a great idea that someone had, to not have to physically touch all the things we touch, that you could scan and look at it on your own device. And outside of actor sides, which I don't think are going to go anywhere anytime soon, because every actor needs those for the most part, in my experience. Everything else can be digital, and there really has been some great innovation during this time that I hope will stick, because it helps the environmental piece of it all.
Mm-hmm. Audrey, what about that innovation piece? You're affiliated with, you work with so many different organizations, at so many different levels, with Viacom, CBS. Where are you seeing that innovation, coming out? What is exciting you right now in the sustainable production arena? Where do you think we should be looking, to kind of like the next phase?
Definitely. I think what excites me the most, and this might be the energy side of my hat, but I think there's some really cool, clean technology coming out in the film and television space. Everything from, the battery electric generators, which I know at this point are pretty advanced and used, not widely yet, but hopefully I think they're really kind of gaining ground from a commercialization standpoint. But everything from, solar trailers and things that are still kind of in the pilot phase, that I think can really, really change how much energy we're consuming, and specifically, like Emily mentioned, fuel for generators. I think that's probably the next big piece that we need to solve as an industry. And I think it's something that, not only is it a big carbon emissions impact, but it's also a community impact when we're filming in an area and we're making noise and we're emitting fumes, and especially now with COVID, we know how much, respiratory health is linked to, your susceptibility to COVID. And so there's a lot there that I think as an industry, we need to take responsibility for. And I think the technology is coming a long way there.
Yeah. Julie, I want to ask you about sort of financial incentives that may be available. Are there tax breaks? Are there financing models that give incentives for sustainable filmmaking?
Not that I know of. And maybe Emily can help school me on that. That was actually something that I was speaking with another producer about, that it would be great if at a legislative level we could make that change, that not only do you get, the New York State tax credit and an extra 5% for going upstate and all of the things that regionally Emily alluded to when she was talking about what's available sustainably. It's also what's available, tax credit wise, as far as putting your project together, especially if you need to use that money up front. And I haven't found one yet that that reflects a sustainable piece, but boy, that would be amazing.
Right, and it seems, so natural. Emily, do you know about anything like that that's available?
Not in the United States, unfortunately. There is a program in Europe. Obviously, the way European projects are funded are way different than ours. But when you're applying to receive film funds through, whatever the Ministry of Culture is, or office that administers those funds, there's some municipalities that will have a point system that basically the more points that you get, the more funds you get. And so some of those points are sustainability practices. So I'm thinking of Trentino, Italy in particular has this program. But I agree with you 100%, Julie, that it would be a game changer if the industry were to adapt to it. I know from talking to a lot of my friends who work in government relations and lobbying for film tax credits that it's a very sensitive subject because of how competitive the tax credits are state to state. Everyone's very afraid that if you touch it in any way, it's going to go away. And so in my perspective, I don't know that it's something that can be linked necessarily with an existing tax credit, but rather can there be an add-on credit? And I think a lot of states are already doing this for clean energy, advancing clean energy adaptations. And so I think, we're not that different, and that there's definitely sort of some potential, some public-private partnership potential on that front that I don't think has been totally tapped into yet.
Maybe we can make a pact here to regroup on that. The Biden administration is greening their fleet, but they also did this great initiative through Artists for Biden, where many companies, including my own, made a donation and started to have the conversation around what sort of legislative changes can happen in the arts and what type of legislative changes we need. And certainly in the film industry, sustainability would be a big piece to that puzzle. It would also inspire so many people in the behavior change side of it, as I think we've all spoken about here today, to really take initiative and say, well, who are the producers working sustainably? What are the companies who can teach us, who can take that off our plate, and really start to function in a more holistic way, where it's not just these practices and film practices, where we see the fusion of how sustainable practices actually are film industry practices if we choose them.
Mm-hmm. I would love that. And I would love, for there to be a way for women in film to help our members and our larger audience sort of be part of recognizing the synthesis of, issues that are at play here, because it is so connected to, the equity piece that we're already invested in advancing. So yeah, if you're interested in that, hit me up. Let's see what women in film can do.
Let's do it
Together. I love it. Okay, so
And the one thing I'll add is that there's also a lot of opportunities at the city level. And Vancouver, for example, has where if you use like electric generator or some kind of sustainable equipment on your set, they will have your daily film permit. So there are some local incentives that I think cities, like in LA, that could be advanced.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to audience questions now. There are several, some of them here in Zoom, some that have come in on Facebook. So let's just start here with this first one. As a set decorator, I really wonder how we as an art department can be more sustainable. Gas use, material waste, and water bottles are a constant battle for me. Does anybody want to, jump in there and say like, okay, talking specifically about an art department, here are things that you can do, here are conversations that you can have.
Sure. I mean, Emily can speak to this as well. I'm sure even better than I can. But I will say that the local of it all is pretty important. Where are you filming? And it starts at a consumer level. Art department is responsible for not only the big set pieces and construction, but also all the smalls that every cast member touches to create life. Everything from a glass to a phone to earrings potentially, if that's not in the wardrobe department. So, how are you buying those things? Is everything being shipped to you? If so, why? How are you traveling to places? Are you renting things and have huge trucks bringing things back and forth? Or is there another way that you could potentially be getting those materials to your team? And then what are you doing with those materials at the end of the shoot? That's a big piece of it. A lot of times all this stuff goes into a storage unit and just rots there, and people buy new every single time. And that's a huge problem. You can choose to look at the community that you're in and ask, who might need these donations and get a tax credit for the film that you're on. That we had a great relationship in upstate New York where we donated everything from art department props and things to closed food that was never used by our chef, and we got a tax certificate at the end that we used for our film. So I would say if there's things that you can do locally, you should really try to do them locally. It's more cost effective to have shoppers, renting, borrowing, and buying things from, a 10-mile radius, as opposed to just shipping things to you. And then at the end, try to have a hiker's mentality of we have to carry out what we've brought in. So how do I do that? And how can I impact the community I'm in a positive way if there's a chance to donate those supplies? And the water bottles and stuff, I feel like that just has to come from the top and production and people making that choice immediately, saying we're not going to have single-use plastics on set. We're going to give everyone a reusable tool. We're going to give everyone or ask everyone to bring their own hot thermos or whatever it is, and that's it. That's how we're consuming beverages on this set.
Right.
Absolutely, Julie. And I think, yeah, in terms of set decoration, sourcing secondhand and renting rather than buying new are huge aspects. We even encourage our set deck coordinators, when they are doing their budgeting and expense tracking for their episodes or whatever they're doing, to actually like create columns in their budgets as well, to like mark when something is like a secondhand purchase versus a rental, because we'll actually crunch the numbers and show like $10,000 worth of materials were sourced secondhand. Like it actually is really beneficial too if you track that, which could be as simple as adding something into your Excel sheet that you're already building your budget into. And then repurposing and donating when you're wrapped 100%. Art Cube Nation, if you're not familiar with them, is an awesome resource that started out of New York, but it's grown to lots of different cities. There's art directors, prop masters, all types of people who work in art, and it's job postings, it's material exchange. So people who have stuff to get rid of, people who are looking for stuff. Great peer-to-peer platform that I highly recommend. Prop Cart is also another great platform to check out. It just basically aggregates the inventories of like lots of different prop houses. So you can see, and you can like search, like I need a red elephant, like whatever you're looking for, you can sort of use the technology to kind of hunt for it in that way as well. So those are some of the key things I think are significant in set decoration.
And I'll also add that, beyond what you can do operationally for yourself, you have a huge power in terms of what we're showing on screen. And I know I keep talking about messaging, but I think it's really important. I mean, that's why product placement exists, and like what Julie mentioned earlier, I mean, if we can have characters, using reusable coffee cups and not, when we think of what happened with smoking and how pervasive it was and how influential it was, I really hope the single-use coffee cup will become like smoking. And when I see it on TV now, it drives me crazy. And so I really hope that, when you're sourcing these materials, not only are you, making sure that they're coming from places like rentals or used, but also, can be things that, it's a recycling bin. It's things that actually, provide messaging to people watching.
I think that's so notable. Like you think about the drive to encourage condom use, for instance, drive to, encourage seatbelt use. This can be the same sort of, social movement. I'm sorry, I interrupted someone speaking.
Oh, I was just going to say just a quick anecdote that's sort of the opposite of that, Audrey, that just made me chuckle, was we worked on a 1970s period piece, and the set deck department, we were shooting in New York City, and so like alleyways and whatever, set deck department literally rolls out trash to litter the street with because it's the 70s in New York. And I was just like, oh my God, this is the opposite of what we were talking about here, but period specific. And yes, we did recycle all of that newspaper when it was done, but yeah.
Your authentic period specific 70s trash.
Yeah.
I will say though, a period pieces just reminded me of, that we filmed in a time before plastic, and as you're mentioning this, like we used to have productions that, had real glasses, and because we didn't have all these plastic cups everywhere. Like I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I noticed that on set, they had the little like crafty table in the background, and they had like the metal water tower and all these little glasses. And I was just thinking, yeah, we used to film without all of this, so we can still do it today.
Yeah.
And it actually ends up looking quite artisanal and elevated and elegant if you choose to do that in a non-COVID space. On the commercial side of my business, we do that all the time, and everyone loves it. They get such a kick out of it. And when we began implementing real flatware and tableware on the film side, it immediately made the meal experience feel relaxed. And it made, I think Emily was the one who mentioned like a traveling circus, right? Made all of we circus folk stop for a minute and actually have a real 30-minute break and sit down and eat off of our plates, and scrape our food waste into a compost bin and put everything into a sink and then put it into a dishwasher that was powered by a solar powered location. All of those little things added up to a lot. And it actually made us feel pretty good as teammates to be able to take that break together and not feel like our time was also disposable. Like I was just eating and throwing it all away, but I was taking a moment to sit and connect and talk to someone and ask how your day was going and if you needed anything else. And how's the food, by the way? Is it good? Is it enough? And all of those things, and have a connection with each other. It's important.
I love that.
I love that. Just real plates, real cutlery, you
Yeah.
know, and changing the atmosphere. Okay, so we have a question here from someone who says, I want to be a part of sustainable filmmaking. Is there a way to become an intern or to get a job at Emily's Earth Angel? Or in a more general way, how do you get started if you're interested in being involved in, you know, sustainable production? You don't want to just do it on, you know, your set, but you'd like to be part of, you know, the kind of industry that you're in. Audrey, you know, Emily, how did you get started? What would you recommend for people?
Yes. So absolutely, we are always in need of more angels. So definitely go to our website. It's earthangel.nyc. We have a rolling applications for the role of an eco PA, which is sort of the sort of starting position in sustainable production on set. So our eco PAs, we recruit them, we train them, we staff them, and then we supervise them on production. So we set them up with all the supplies and all the training and wherewithal, and then they're the ones that are sort of with the shooting crew day to day, setting up the waste stations, setting up the water stations, and making it all happen on a day-to-day basis. So if that interests you, check that out. And we also have other opportunities as well. But yeah, I mean, really my path to this was like, I was a filmmaker. I studied film at NYU, turned environmental entrepreneur. I just basically entered the industry and I was like, oh no, this isn't going to work for me. Like, I'm not going to be able to work in an industry that is part of the problem. Like, we can't, this just doesn't sit well with me. And I convinced a producer to hire me in 2011 to green his set. And then other producers started calling me after that and said, hey, I heard what you did on this set. Can you come do it on my set? And that's sort of how Earth Angel grew and evolved. So it was a very organic way. So I would say, if you're interested in kind of the day-to-day production, physical production side of sustainability, definitely come check us out. But Audrey, you should definitely speak to the corporate side as well.
Definitely. And so I'd say, you know, most studios have a sustainability department, whether that be the corporate side or production specific. So, you know, there's always a great place to check for internships. We usually have a summer intern. And then I would also say, you know, I think being trained as a green PA is a great place to start. And Emily has a great program in New York for that. And then through greenproductionguide.com, again, we are, you know, in that vendor section. There's a place to, I think it's, trying to remember what it says. I think get listed is what it says. And in there, if you are a trained eco PA or are interested in doing that work, you can register there as an eco PA. And then, yeah, I would say just, yeah, exactly, you know, get involved any way you can. I mean, I think, you know, there's no better place to be doing environmental work than wherever you are. You know, we need it to be everywhere. So definitely, you know, try to do it where you can.
And I will say too, you know, no matter what your position is on a film set, if sustainability is something that's important to you, even if it doesn't seem to be important to the producers on that set, you can still make choices in your own department. And I think the PA is an amazing person to begin with, because the humans who function as production assistants make the set work, literally. Without that communication, the whole thing falls apart. So if you are trained and have that extra layer of understanding of not only call and response and the needs of the different departments, but how to fulfill those needs while making sustainable choices, then you have an invaluable skill set that many people don't have. And I wouldn't be afraid to approach a department head or approach a production manager and offer some of those services, because it isn't common yet. And the value of having someone who has been trained and does understand those things is important. And the value of your voice is important. And I hope that if someone does speak up and say, you know, maybe we could try it like this, that you would be heard. And again, that even if it's just your department, you know, that's how we can start making a more global change too, because we can be that change and inspire each other.
Fantastic. And a wonderful way to wrap up this conversation, which went way too quickly. We didn't get through nearly all of the questions. I will say, for those of you asking, yes, we captured the various resources that were mentioned. And so make sure you're signed up for the Women in Film newsletter. We're going to post a recap. We'll also post a video, but we'll give you that list of resources that have been mentioned. But until then, I do want to say, please do check out earthangel.nyc to find out more about Earth Angel and Emily's work. You can go to tandempictures.com to find out more about Julie's work and about Tandem Pictures. And you can also go to viacomcbs.com/sustainability to find out more about Audrey's work and the work that Viacom CBS is doing. Everyone, this was fantastic and so informative. I'm sitting with Julie's comment about the hiker's mentality. Like that's gonna stick with me. I love that, you know, as a phrase to kind of take forward. So thank you all for sharing this wealth of information, for sharing your experience and, you know, the motivation to get out there and start considering where we can make these absolutely vital changes that need to be made in our industry. This has really been wonderful. Thank you all for being here. Thanks
for including me, and great to speak with you, Emily and Audrey. I feel really privileged to have had this conversation with you. Let's continue it.
Absolutely.
Likewise. Thank you, Ebony, for this great opportunity.
And thanks everyone for tuning in here in Zoom and on Facebook. We will see you next month for Women in Film Speaker Series. But on this note, we're ending tonight. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.